Hi, mine's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, another one of them emergency videos because British politics has gone absolutely mad. I'm going to explain what happened with the fatal motion with regards to the Public Order Bill last night. Despite a lot of complaining on Twitter, had absolutely nothing to do with what people think it did. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel. So yes, I was going to probably do this one at the weekend when I caught up a bit, but I think events may well overtake it. So let's get it done now. I've had a lot of people asking for my thoughts on the fatal motion last night, in which Labour, of course, refused to support it in the Lords, as they'd said for some time they would do. I did cover the meat of this weeks ago, because there's nothing new about this. As the precise purpose for the fatal motion changed a little, I will expand on the explanation rather than just point people to the previous video, because some things have changed. So the first thing to note is what this was and what it wasn't. So to read the comments on Twitter and I suppose other social media platforms, people think that this motion from the Greens last night was to obliterate the Public Order Act. Oh, the Public Order Act's really terrible. This will sink it. You know, it's attacking people's rights to peaceful protest and blah, 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 and everyone should have supported this motion. Now, in some ways, it's understandable that people would think that's what this was about, because that's what the proposer, Jenny Jones of the Green Party, suggested in this context weeks ago, and I covered that in a video weeks ago. Although I will point out, for those who think this was what the motion was about, again, you are basically saying that you think the unelected Lords should block legislation from elected MPs. Just be careful of the precedent you want to set there. But it wasn't about that anyway. What happened was the government were playing dirty with part of the bill already voted down by the Lords. Suella Braverman wanted to use a statutory instrument, and indeed has done now, in order to get particularly unpleasant parts of the bill through the Lords without having to give her MPs a vote to re-establish it in the House of Commons, because there's a lot of Tory MPs very uncomfortable about this. And you know, although you'd think to yourself, well, haven't these Tory MPs already voted it through the House of Commons? Yet they have, but a number of them have also expressed concern about it, because this bill, as it stands, is truly awful. It needs fixing. So Tory MPs allowed it to go through because, like with all bills, there are some parts of the bills they approve of. There are some parts they go, okay, well, we need this, we approve of this, we don't like these other bits. So what they said is, we'll let it go to the Lords will amend it, and then when it's been amended, we will be happy with it and we will let it through. So Braverman is basically saving their blushes by effectively ignoring a vote in the Lords by applying this statutory instrument. It is an abuse of the function of statutory instruments. So the motion was set up to prevent it. Basically say to the government, look, if you don't do this properly, we'll just delete everything. Which all sounds very reasonable. It is very reasonable. The stated purpose of the fatal motion is reasonable. The fatal motion was not about stopping the Public Order Bill. It wasn't about blocking a bill that the House of Commons has passed. It was about stopping Braverman, who's a member of the government. Remember, we don't elect our government. The government are usually comprised of elected MPs, but they're not elected to government, to stop her saving her MPs from a tricky issue. If the Tories want to pass laws in Parliament, they can do it properly through the usual parliamentary processes. That's the aim of the motion. So, all sounds reasonable. Why didn't Labour support it then? Multiple reasons. The first one I discussed in the video weeks ago, the public don't want to know what a statutory instrument is. If I were to go onto the streets of a marginal constituency, if I were to go to Selby and Aintree and ask people on the streets, oh, what do you think about all this statutory instrument nonsense with the Public Order Bill? They'll go, what are you on about, mate? Oh, what do you think of Labour, you know, not supporting the Jenny Jones's fatal motion in the House of Lords? What are you on about? Can you speak English, please? Oh, what do you think about the bill that the government reckon is going to be used to allow police to deal with Just Stop Oil protesters blocking the roads? Oh yeah, I'm totally in favour of that. We know from polling the public approve of that. As far as the public's concerned, the Public Order Bill is to give police the power to stop people sitting on roads blocking traffic. That's it. That's what they think it is. They don't know about all the other bits in it. That's what they think it is, and they approve of that. So if Labour supported the motion to finish it off, the Tories would the very next day be saying Labour is stopping the police from dealing with these unpopular protests, which is also preventing them from dealing with the crimes you want them to deal with, burglaries and assaults. Overnight, Labour are responsible for every policing failure in the country. Basically, Labour may as well throw their pitch on law and order in the bin. As I say, no end of times, if you don't like Tory policies, don't support the idea that Labour in opposition, maybe once every 5 years, will have a chance to, block some legislation. In reality, they will never have this wasn't about blocking legislation, just delaying it. That's all it would have done as well. It would have delayed it. It wouldn't have killed anything off. It wouldn't have finished anything. It would have just forced the government to put their shoulder behind it to get it through. But if you want to stop Tory policies, then what you need to do is to arrange for a Labour government, because then they're all stopped. You don't have to hope that maybe once every 5 years you can stop one. They all get stopped, every single one. But that is not the only reason. That's a big reason. That's the big electoral reasons. There's another one as well. Well, there's a couple really. There is also the issue of Labour using an unelected chamber to block what is seen as elected MPs in the Commons. Now, I will just tackle here, because for example, Wes Streeting came out today and said, look, we can't use the House of Lords to block the House of Commons. People go, no, but that's not what it's about. No, it's not what it's about, but it absolutely will be what it's about to the public when the media explains it to them. That's what it will be about. The House of Lords has blocked something that the House of Commons wanted. It's not true. The House of Lords would have been blocking something that Suella Braverman wanted, a member of the government, not on behalf of the Commons. This is all about, remember, not the bill, the statutory instrument, but the public would not have seen it that way. Very damaging to Labour, but not half as damaging as the precedent they would set. Because right now, we are getting through the last agonising months of the most terrible Conservative government. It's been around for 13 years. It's still got a bit more to go, but we're at the end now. The end is in sight. But what happens when Labour come to power, right? They need to pass a lot of legislation very quickly in order to turn things around. Indeed, the very people whining at Labour right now over this are actually wanting them to pass more legislation than there's possibly time to deal with in Parliament as it is. So actually, these people are saying that Labour needs to, when they come to power, deal with lots of legislation incredibly quickly. Oh, you need to be really quick. Oh, right, that's interesting. So what happens is, Labour in power, they start to put legislation through. Passes through the House of Commons, no problem, goes to the House of Lords. So then, what do you think Tory peers do? They go, Labour. Oh, this is from Labour, is it? Oh, okay, I see. Labour, they're fine with unelected lords blocking legislation from the elected House of Commons, aren't they? That's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, we can do that now, and they will seek to block everything. They won't succeed in many cases, but they will slow the process right down, feeling justified because of the one time that Labour did it to them. Some legislation may be put back a year or more because of this. And then what? Labour failed to deliver the programme they promised and are booted out at the next election. Not that Jenny Jones is bothered about that. Stop Starmer abolishing the House of Lords. She doesn't want that. She doesn't like that policy. And that will be what happens. And another thing I'll point out. So ultimately what I'm saying is this is about party politics. It's also party politics for the Greens, because what I'll point out here is, so Jones of the Greens, the way she went about this motion was highly unusual. Now, fatal motions are, of course, incredibly rare. So, anything to do with them is fairly unusual. But most of the time when they're proposed, they're never really put to a vote because they're so serious, because it does ultimately represent the unelected chamber monkeying about with what's come from the House of Commons. Because although we're talking about something that's come from the government, they're in the House of Commons. Suella Braverman is an MP. She's a member of the House of Commons. And she is assumed to have the majority of MPs behind her as well, because if not, they can just vote against her in the Commons. So it's really serious when the Lords decides to do this. And because normally they're supposed to review legislation, suggest amendments, not force anything, just suggest. And in order to apply a fatal motion like this, two things need to be true. The first, there has to be serious concern at the constitutional arrangements. Now, that is absolutely arguably true in this case. So far, so good. The second is that the motion has to have the support to succeed. This was not true. Labour had said in advance that they will not be supporting it. Jones knew that she did not have support for the motion. Now, under normal circumstances, it would not go for a vote because it's a foregone conclusion. She put it to a vote anyway. Why? The reason she put it to a vote was for her own party purposes. She wants to win in Brighton. Caroline Lucas is stepping down, right? So they're going to have someone who's maybe not so popular. The Green Party in Brighton has suffered serious reputational loss. We saw that in the local elections and in the £3 million debt hole that they have left behind. So the seats of Brighton is going to be challenging. It really is going to be a contest between Labour and the Greens. And oh look, what happened immediately today after this fatal motion nonsense last night? The Green Party coming out with the SNP line, you know, oh, there's no difference between Labour and the Conservatives. This is for their own party political purposes, you know. And if you were, she used the motion not to protect our rights. The bill, I'm not saying the motion, the suggestion of the motion was a cynical attempt to play party politics. The motion, if it was going to be supported, it's absolutely justifiable. The reason it was pushed like this was to attack Labour. She knew that non-partisan voices on social media will attack Labour for it, as indeed they have. She gives the candidate in Brighton, whomever that ends up being, a boost. If she was bothered about our rights, she wouldn't have supported Brexit, is how I would look at it. So it was a party political move all around. It's party political from Labour's point of view, party political from the Greens' point of view. Politics is a dirty affair, essentially. Like, it's why most people stay away from it, because it's unpleasant. And when people are interested, it is good to be interested in politics because it affects us all. People should be interested in it. But there's a lot of people don't really like to get involved in the grubbiness because it's incredibly grubby, which means then a lot of people show an interest in politics, but they don't bother to really find out what's going on. So, for example, when what happened last night, a load of people just go, oh, Labour, oh, they want this. And it's like, does that make sense, really? Does that make sense? Why did they vote against it then? Why are they voting against everything as part of this bill? No. Labour don't want police arresting peaceful protesters. For a start, that would destroy their support if they allowed that in government. Absolutely destroy it. Madness. It's like on the same level as Lib Dems playing like handmaiden to austerity. It would kill off a load of their support. Yes, they will allow police to move people from roads disrupting traffic because the public do demand that, but they're not going to allow genuinely peaceful protests to be attacked, which means they're going to need to deal with it in government. Now, some people will look at it and go, well, wasn't it easier and quicker to have dealt with it now? Well, no, because it only reduces, first of all, it reduces the chances of winning the election, which then means they can't deal with it at all. But also because the Lords cannot stop this. They can't stop it. All that would happen if it had gone through last night is the government would have said, right, well, we'll get our MPs to vote it through, then you can't have a problem, can you? Because that is the issue here. If MPs had actually just voted for this, then the Lords would have gone, fair enough. So that's all they would do. They're just trying to give their MPs, they're trying to help their MPs avoid what could be an awkward vote, that's all. But it would delay it, not stop it. But it is worth pointing out. So I go back to the point that some Tory MPs say they only voted for it to go to the Lords because they expected amendments, right? The implication being that if that bill, because after the Lords it goes back to the Commons, it's not finished, it goes back to the Commons. The assumption being that those MPs, if they have that bill put in front of them and the worst effects of it are not dealt with, because they expected the Lords to deal with it, right? If it's not dealt with, the implication is that those Tory MPs will not support it. That's what Labour are saying. Now, if that turns out to be true, Labour will have played an absolute blinder because they wouldn't have fallen into the Tories' incredibly obvious trap. But also, the worst parts of it would have been dealt with anyway, without having to resort to a fatal motion in the Lords. Okay? I'm not convinced that is what's going to happen, though. I'm not convinced, and I'll tell you why. It's not that I don't think there are Tory MPs genuinely upset about some of the aspects of this bill. There are. I think there are. The problem would be, if they were to defeat it when it goes back to the Commons, that would be to inflict a defeat of the government. The Conservatives are tearing each other to pieces at the moment. You know, Boris Johnson is really trying to cause immense amounts of damage, which is largely what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow, I suspect. The last thing they want to do is embarrass the government by defeating it in a vote, because then they might as well call the election right now, just like Keir Starmer wants them to, or says he wants them to. So that's why, although under normal circumstances, I could see some Tory MPs say, no, this isn't good enough, I think they'll probably prioritise the unity of their party ahead of their concerns, you know, like they always do. So I strongly suspect that it will go through like this, which means that then Labour will have to deal with it. Because Labour will deal with it. They have to. It won't be the Greens dealing with it. It'll be Labour in government dealing with it. Because that is the only way to deal with it. If Labour risked the election just for the sake of what? Having a small number of people on Twitter go, oh, well done. Yes, jolly good. Now just stand in line while we attack you for the next thing we don't like about you, then I wouldn't thank them for that. I've said it before. Labour's job is to get into government. Once they're into government, all Tory policies are blocked. Every single one. But there we are anyway. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.